Peace is not the absence of noise, but the absence of truth. This thought captures the unsettling reality behind many quiet rooms, tense family dinners, or workplaces where important truths remain unspoken. We often associate peace with comfort, but in psychology, silence is rarely neutral. It carries weight, unspoken conflicts, and hidden tensions that shape how we behave and how relationships evolve over time. Imagine you are in a meeting. A colleague has made an unfair comment about you, yet you do not respond. You convince yourself that staying silent avoids making the situation worse. You feel your chest tighten, your hands sweat, and your mind replay the moment in slow motion, but your mouth remains closed. That is the human tendency to equate silence with keeping the peace. The quiet moment appears calm on the surface, but underneath, psychological currents are moving fast. This is where dark psychology begins to explain what really happens when people stay silent. The decision to withhold speech is rarely free from psychological forces. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, and social conformity pressure individuals to maintain harmony even when the cost to themselves is high. Silence may look like control, yet it often signals inner turmoil and emotional suppression. When this happens repeatedly, suppressed emotions start to affect mental and even physical health. We live in societies that reward quiet compliance. From an early age, children are taught to avoid raising their voice, to not argue with authority, and to keep disagreements private. This conditioning carries into adulthood, shaping how we manage relationships and workplaces. The message is simple: keeping quiet will protect you and protect others. Yet the data from psychological studies paints a different picture. Long-term emotional suppression is linked to increased anxiety, higher levels of stress hormones, and a greater risk of relationship breakdown. Dark psychology explores the power dynamics behind silence. In some cases, silence is chosen to avoid harm. In others, it is used as a weapon. The silent treatment, for instance, is a form of manipulation where one person withdraws communication to control or punish another. Victims of this tactic often blame themselves, feeling guilty or desperate to restore peace, without realizing that this dynamic slowly erodes their sense of self-worth. Over time, they may internalize the idea that their voice does not matter. Research into group behavior also shows how silence spreads through communities. The Conformity experiments, for example, demonstrated how people will suppress their true opinions when surrounded by a majority that disagrees. This collective quiet creates false harmony, making it appear as though everyone agrees when many privately dissent. The result is a culture where important truths remain buried and injustices continue unchecked. When people stay silent, the mind does not simply rest. Suppressed emotions linger, turning into resentment or quiet suffering. In relationships, this silence can slowly poison trust. In workplaces, it allows toxic behaviors to flourish. In societies, it enables corruption and systemic abuse to go unchallenged. The longer the silence continues, the more dangerous it becomes, because unspoken problems do not resolve themselves, they grow. There is a common misconception that speaking out always creates conflict. In reality, silence often creates conflict too, but it is hidden and harder to address. The human mind craves peace, but authentic peace cannot exist without honesty. This is the uncomfortable truth that dark psychology forces us to confront. Peace, built on silence, is fragile, and when it finally breaks, the damage is far greater than if the truth had been spoken earlier. Behind every quiet room, behind every withheld opinion, there is a cost. That cost may be invisible to outsiders, but it is deeply felt by the one who remains quiet. For most of human history, there has been a belief that keeping quiet prevents conflict and maintains harmony. Parents teach children to hold their tongue at the dinner table. Teachers praise students who avoid speaking out of turn. Workplaces quietly reward employees who do not challenge decisions. These behaviors shape the assumption that silence equals maturity and self-control. The idea feels comforting because it avoids the discomfort of confrontation. It also allows groups to function smoothly on the surface, at least for a while. When people stay silent to preserve peace, they often believe they are preventing harm. They tell themselves that voicing concerns would escalate the situation or cause pain to someone they care about. This belief seems logical in the moment, yet it rarely accounts for what happens underneath. Psychology shows that suppressed emotions do not disappear. They remain active in the mind and body, often resurfacing as anxiety, frustration, or even physical illness. Research on emotional suppression has demonstrated clear links between chronic silence and increased stress levels, higher blood pressure, and difficulty regulating emotions. Dark psychology examines how silence can be shaped by fear rather than choice. When you stay quiet, ask yourself if the decision is based on thoughtful restraint or fear of rejection, humiliation, or conflict. These fears are often rooted in early life experiences. A child who grew up in a home where speaking up led to punishment learns to equate silence with safety. As an adult, that same person may automatically remain quiet in tense moments, believing it will prevent danger, even when no real threat exists. This false belief is reinforced by cultural expectations. Many societies idealize the image of the calm, silent individual who never complains. In reality, this ideal can be harmful. It can prevent necessary conversations, discourage healthy disagreements, and allow toxic behaviors to go unchallenged. Social conformity plays a powerful role here. People are more likely to stay silent when everyone else appears calm, even if multiple individuals privately disagree. The result is a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance, where everyone assumes others agree with the silence, when in fact many are suffering quietly. Philosophically, silence is often praised as a sign of wisdom. Ancient traditions speak of the value of stillness and inner calm. However, there is a critical difference between chosen silence and imposed silence. Chosen silence comes from self-awareness and control, while imposed silence emerges from fear or manipulation. Confusing the two can lead to harmful patterns in relationships and communities. The cost of this false belief appears over time. Relationships built on unspoken grievances eventually fracture. Work environments where employees stay silent about unethical practices eventually collapse under scandal. Families who avoid difficult conversations often carry generational trauma. The silence may feel protective in the moment, but it plants seeds that grow into larger problems. Breaking this belief requires examining what peace truly means. Is peace the absence of sound, or is it the presence of honesty and understanding? Psychological research consistently shows that authentic peace comes from addressing conflict directly rather than avoiding it. Healthy communication, even when uncomfortable, prevents resentment and fosters genuine trust. The lie that silence protects peace remains widespread because it feels safer than confronting discomfort. Yet behind every quiet decision, the mind weighs a heavy burden. This burden is rarely visible to others, but deeply felt by the one who carries it. When people stay silent, they do not simply remove words from the moment. They begin storing emotions inside themselves, locking away anger, sadness, or frustration that eventually shapes their health and behavior. Emotional suppression is one of the most studied psychological phenomena because of its profound impact on both the mind and body. Research conducted by James Gross and other experts in emotional regulation shows that suppressing emotions triggers heightened physiological stress responses, such as increased heart rate and elevated blood pressure. Over time, this constant internal strain contributes to chronic anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. The human body is not designed to hold unexpressed tension indefinitely. Suppressed emotions often resurface in unexpected ways. A quiet employee who never objects to unfair treatment may develop resentment that spills out later as passive aggression. A partner who consistently avoids difficult conversations might eventually withdraw emotionally, leaving the relationship hollow and distant. Families that teach members to suppress anger or grief frequently pass on patterns of silence to the next generation, creating cycles of avoidance and unspoken pain. Dark psychology provides a clearer lens for understanding why suppression is so damaging. Silence is not always neutral. It can be exploited. Manipulative individuals recognize that those who suppress emotions are less likely to resist control. The silent partner is easier to dominate. The silent worker is easier to exploit. The silent child is easier to condition. This dynamic is not accidental. It thrives on fear and conditioning, quietly shaping power structures in homes, workplaces, and entire communities. Suppression also leads to internal conflict. When your external behavior does not match your internal feelings, the result is cognitive dissonance, a psychological state of discomfort caused by holding conflicting beliefs or emotions. For example, you may feel anger towards someone, but continue acting politely. This mental conflict drains energy and reduces emotional resilience. Over time, the dissonance can distort your self-image, leaving you uncertain about your own values and unable to trust your instincts. Philosophically, suppression creates a deeper existential cost. To remain silent is often to deny part of your own truth. When repeated long enough, it erodes authenticity. You begin to question whether your voice matters at all. This loss of personal agency is one of the most devastating consequences of chronic suppression. People start living as observers in their own lives, watching events unfold rather than shaping them. The cost is not limited to the individual. Suppressed emotions leak into relationships and environments. Even when unspoken, a room filled with quiet tension affects everyone inside it. Psychologists refer to this as emotional contagion, where unexpressed stress spreads through subtle cues like body language, tone, and micro-expressions. This means that even if you do not speak, your silence still communicates discomfort, and others unconsciously respond to it. Ignoring suppressed emotions does not prevent conflict. It only delays it. When emotions are buried, they grow stronger in the dark, often emerging at moments that feel disproportionate to the situation. A small disagreement becomes an explosive argument. A minor slight triggers overwhelming anger. The original cause of pain may even be forgotten, yet the suppressed energy remains, waiting for release. The psychological cost of suppression is heavy, and its presence is often invisible. Outwardly, the person appears calm and composed. Inwardly, they carry unspoken pain that slowly erodes their well-being. This hidden suffering accumulates until one day it can no longer be contained, and by the time it surfaces, it is often too late to repair the damage fully. Silence can appear harmless, yet under the lens of dark psychology, it reveals itself as one of the most effective tools for control and manipulation. When people stay silent, either by choice or coercion, they become part of an unspoken psychological contract. The person who controls the silence often holds the power, while the one silenced loses ground in both influence and self-expression. This is why silence appears in abusive relationships, authoritarian workplaces, and toxic friendships, where withholding speech is not accidental but strategic. One of the clearest examples of this tactic is the silent treatment. In this form of psychological manipulation, an individual deliberately withdraws communication to punish or dominate another person. The target, often desperate for resolution, begins question their own behavior and may assume blame even when they did nothing wrong. Over time, this creates a power imbalance, where one person controls the emotional tone of the relationship simply by refusing to speak. Research in relational psychology shows that the silent treatment is strongly linked to increased anxiety, reduced self-esteem, and feelings of isolation in its victims. Dark psychology also examines silence as a shield for unethical behavior. In settings where manipulation or exploitation occurs, silence becomes a barrier that hides the truth. An abusive partner counts on the victim's fear of speaking out. A corrupt organization benefits from employees staying quiet about misconduct. This calculated use of silence is not passive. It is an active strategy designed to maintain control and avoid accountability. The psychological harm caused by this dynamic is profound. often leaving victims with long-lasting trust issues and emotional scars. There is another side to this phenomenon. Individuals themselves may choose silence because they have been conditioned to believe it is safer. This conditioning often starts in childhood environments, where voicing discomfort led to punishment or neglect. The brain learns that silence equals safety, and this pattern becomes automatic in adulthood. In relationships, this manifests as chronic self-censorship. People avoid sharing needs, opinions, or boundaries because they expect negative consequences. This self-imposed silence, although protective at first, eventually becomes self-destructive. Philosophy intersects here by questioning the morality of silence. When does withholding speech become complicity? Is remaining quiet in the face of wrongdoing a neutral act, or does it contribute to harm? Moral philosophers have long debated this tension. The bystander effect in psychology, where individuals fail to intervene during emergencies because they expect someone else to act, illustrates how silence can perpetuate harm. The absence of words does not erase responsibility, it often deepens it. Manipulators understand these dynamics. Instinctively, they rely on silence to create ambiguity, making targets unsure of where they stand. In abusive relationships, silence keeps the victim guessing. In toxic work cultures, silence maintains fear of reprisal. In family systems, silence protects harmful traditions from scrutiny. These patterns thrive because speaking out feels dangerous, while staying quiet appears safe. Yet in reality, silence often empowers the manipulator and traps the victim further. When examined closely, silence is rarely neutral in dark psychological contexts. It is a signal, a weapon, or a symptom of deeper control, whether chosen or imposed. It reshapes relationships, erodes trust, and maintains imbalances of power. This quiet dynamic often continues unnoticed until the harm has already taken root and becomes part of the very structure of the relationship itself. From early childhood, individuals are immersed in environments that reward compliance and punish dissent. Families often teach children that speaking out is disrespectful, while schools encourage quiet obedience as a measure of good behavior. This early conditioning establishes a deep association between silence and safety, preparing individuals to equate peace with the absence of conflict, rather than the presence of resolution. As children grow into adults, these learned patterns shape personal relationships, work dynamics, and even civic responsibilities. This conditioning does not occur by accident. Social structures rely on order, and order is easier to maintain when individuals conform. Silence becomes the unspoken rule that sustains this structure. Psychological studies on conformity, such as those conducted by Solomon Asch, reveal how individuals often suppress their opinions when faced with a unanimous group, even if they know the group is wrong. The fear of standing out, of disrupting perceived harmony, overrides personal judgment. People stay silent not because they agree, but because disagreement feels unsafe. Fear of disruption is magnified in modern social settings. In workplaces, employees may avoid voicing concerns about unethical practices for fear of losing their jobs. In families, members may avoid difficult conversations to prevent rifts that feel irreversible. In friendships, individuals may stay quiet to maintain bonds that are already fragile. This silence is rarely about genuine peace. It is about preserving stability, even if that stability is built on unresolved tension. Dark psychology explores how fear reinforces silence in manipulative contexts. Abusive individuals exploit this conditioning by framing objections as disrespect or disloyalty. Victims internalize this message, believing that their silence is the only way to maintain connection. Over time, they stop distinguishing between chosen quietness and coerced quietness, leaving them vulnerable to further exploitation. This pattern is particularly evident in coercive control, where silence becomes the cornerstone of an abuser's power. Philosophical perspectives add another layer to this discussion. Thinkers across cultures have examined the moral implications of conformity. While harmony is valued, it raises a critical question. Does peace without honesty have any real moral worth? A society that equates compliance with virtue risks suppressing the very voices needed to challenge injustice. History provides countless examples, from totalitarian regimes to corporate scandals, where widespread silence enabled harm to persist unchecked. Social conditioning also fosters a collective misunderstanding of conflict. Conflict is viewed as dangerous and destructive, rather than necessary and constructive. This belief prevents people from learning how to engage in healthy disagreement. Without these skills, individuals default to avoidance, mistaking short-term quiet for long-term harmony. Yet unresolved conflicts often resurface stronger than before, and the longer they remain hidden, the more destructive their eventual eruption becomes. The fear of disruption is not just external, it is internalized. People learn to censor themselves before others can, anticipating negative reactions, even when none are present. This internal voice of caution is powerful. It convinces individuals that speaking up will lead to rejection, embarrassment, or isolation. In reality, these fears are often exaggerated, yet they continue to dictate behavior because they feel real at a psychological level. The result of this conditioning is a culture where silence appears normal, even virtuous. Individuals convince themselves they are preserving peace, when in fact they are preserving dysfunction. The quiet compliance that feels safe in the moment often lays the groundwork for deeper fractures that emerge later when suppressed truths finally surface in ways that are far more painful and damaging than any honest conversation could have been. When people stay silent, it often creates the appearance of harmony. But this harmony is an illusion. What looks like calm on the surface frequently hides tension that grows stronger over time. In families, workplaces, and communities, quiet rooms may feel peaceful, yet the peace is built on avoidance rather than understanding. This false harmony is one of the most studied dynamics in social and organizational psychology because of how effectively it conceals conflict until it can no longer be ignored. Groupthink research provides a clear lens into this phenomenon. Solomon Ash's experiments on conformity demonstrated how individuals often abandon their own perception of reality to align with the group. When everyone else remains quiet, a person assumes agreement even if many secretly dissent. The silence reinforces itself, creating a cycle where no one speaks, because everyone believes silence equals consensus. This creates an environment where critical thinking is replaced by compliance, and where false harmony hides deeper fractures within the group. In relationships, the illusion of harmony can be equally destructive. Partners may avoid expressing dissatisfaction out of fear of conflict, believing they are protecting the relationship. Over time, unresolved grievances accumulate, eroding trust and intimacy. This process is subtle. There are no arguments, no dramatic confrontations, just a slow withdrawal of emotional investment. The relationship appears stable from the outside, yet it is quietly deteriorating beneath the surface. Dark psychology exposes how false harmony benefits those in positions of control. Leaders, abusers, or dominant individuals can maintain power more easily when others stay silent. The absence of opposition creates the impression that everything is functioning smoothly. This illusion discourages others from speaking up, reinforcing the silence even further. In abusive environments, false harmony becomes a survival mechanism where individuals pretend everything is fine to avoid escalation or retaliation. Philosophical questions emerge when considering the cost of this illusion. Can peace truly exist without truth? If harmony is sustained by suppression rather than mutual understanding, does it deserve to be called peace at all? Ethical philosophy often challenges this false calm, arguing that authentic peace requires honesty, even when honesty brings discomfort. Without addressing root causes, false harmony becomes a fragile construct that collapses under the weight of unspoken truths. The psychological toll of maintaining this illusion is significant. People who suppress emotions to preserve harmony often experience emotional dissonance, a state where their internal reality conflicts with their external behavior. This dissonance leads to heightened stress and can manifest physically through fatigue, headaches, and sleep disturbances. It also erodes self-trust, as individuals begin to question whether their silence reflects restraint or weakness. The illusion of harmony extends beyond personal relationships into broader societal contexts. Institutions plagued by systemic issues often appear orderly because dissenting voices are suppressed. Corporations embroiled in unethical practices may maintain a facade of professionalism while silencing whistleblowers. Governments that discourage open criticism may appear unified but are often sustained by fear rather than consensus. These illusions are powerful because they make problems invisible until they become too large to contain. False harmony can persist for years, yet it is inherently unstable. When the truth finally emerges, the disruption is often severe. The very conflicts that were avoided resurface with greater intensity as years of unspoken frustration and resentment come to light all at once. What was once thought of as peace is revealed to be fragile quiet, shattered by the weight of reality that silence could never erase. Silence may begin as a form of protection, but under certain circumstances it becomes dangerous. When people stay silent in the face of harm, silence shifts from a personal coping mechanism to a force that enables abuse, corruption, and injustice. This transformation is widely observed in psychology and history, where silence not only allows harm to continue, but often intensifies the damage inflicted on individuals and entire groups. One of the clearest examples of this danger is seen in abusive relationships. Victims often remain quiet to avoid escalating conflict or provoking further harm. The abuser interprets this quietness not as fear, but as compliance. Over time, the absence of resistance reinforces the abuser's control, deepening the cycle of manipulation. In such dynamics, silence does not protect peace. It protects the power imbalance. Victims learn to minimize their presence, censor their thoughts, and internalize blame. This psychological conditioning leaves deep scars as the victim begins to lose trust in their own perception of reality. The same principle applies in larger social contexts. In workplaces, silence allows unethical practices to continue unchecked. Employees who fear retaliation may choose to remain quiet about fraud, harassment, or exploitation. Over time, this collective silence creates a toxic culture where wrongdoing becomes normalized. Psychological studies on whistleblower behavior highlight how fear of isolation and career loss prevents individuals from speaking up, even when they recognize the moral cost of staying quiet. Historical events also demonstrate the destructive potential of widespread silence. Atrocities committed during times of war or oppression often relied not only on the actions of perpetrators, but also on the compliance of bystanders. The bystander effect, a well-documented phenomenon in social psychology, explains how individuals assume someone else will intervene, leading to widespread inaction. In these moments, silence enables harm on a massive scale, transforming ordinary individuals into passive participants in injustice. Dark psychology explains why silence becomes dangerous by revealing the interplay between fear, power, and conditioning. When silence is driven by fear, individuals prioritize short-term safety over long-term consequences. When silence benefits those in power, it becomes a tool for control. And when silence is normalized by culture, individuals lose awareness of its cost. This combination allows dangerous patterns to persist unnoticed until the harm becomes too severe to ignore. Philosophers have long grappled with the moral weight of silence. Is it enough to do no harm, or must one actively resist harm to be ethical? The uncomfortable truth is that silence often straddles this line. Remaining quiet can unintentionally perpetuate the very harm one wishes to avoid. In this way, silence becomes morally ambiguous. It is neither entirely innocent nor entirely guilty, yet its consequences are undeniable. The psychological toll of dangerous silence is profound. Individuals who remain quiet in the face of harm often experience guilt and shame later. especially when the consequences of inaction become visible. This emotional burden lingers, sometimes for a lifetime. Survivors of traumatic events frequently describe feelings of regret for not speaking up sooner, even when silence was their only perceived option at the time. Dangerous silence does not announce itself. It feels safe, reasonable, even protective in the moment, yet its effects ripple outward, shaping relationships, communities, and entire societies. By the time its consequences are recognized, the damage is often deeply rooted and far more difficult to repair than if the truth had been spoken earlier. Not all silence is harmful. In psychology, there is an important distinction between unconscious silence, born of fear, and conscious silence chosen with intention. When people stay silent deliberately, they do so not to avoid conflict, but to manage it constructively. This form of silence serves as a tool for reflection, emotional regulation, and thoughtful response, rather than submission or suppression. Understanding this difference allows individuals to reclaim silence as a healthy choice, rather than a passive surrender. Conscious silence begins with awareness. Instead of automatically withholding speech out of habit or fear, individuals pause to examine their motives. Are they quiet because they are avoiding discomfort? Or are they quiet because they are choosing to listen and understand? This self-inquiry changes the psychological experience of silence. Rather than fueling anxiety or resentment, conscious silence provides space for clarity and measured response. In therapeutic settings, conscious silence is often used to regulate emotional arousal. By pausing instead of reacting impulsively, individuals create distance between stimulus and response. This pause allows for thoughtful communication that can de-escalate conflict rather than inflame it. Couples therapy frequently teaches partners to use silence as a moment for reflection before addressing emotionally charged issues, reducing the likelihood of harmful outbursts. Philosophical traditions have long valued silence as a path to wisdom when practiced intentionally. Stoic philosophy encourages the discipline of measured speech, reminding individuals to speak only when words add value. Eastern contemplative practices, such as meditation, view silence as a gateway to deeper self-understanding and emotional balance. These approaches recognize that peace cannot be imposed from outside, but must be cultivated internally, often beginning with quiet introspection. Dark psychology, however, warns of the fine line between conscious and unconscious silence. Even well-intentioned quietness can slide into avoidance, if not carefully monitored. For example, someone may rationalize their silence as patience, when in reality, they are afraid of confrontation. This subtle shift turns what could be a constructive choice into another form of suppression. Recognizing this distinction is critical to prevent harm, while preserving the benefits of intentional quiet. The benefits of conscious silence extend beyond personal well-being. In relationships, intentional quietness can foster deeper listening and empathy. When one person chooses to pause, it encourages others to speak more honestly. This exchange builds trust and allows underlying issues to surface naturally, rather than through confrontation. In workplaces, leaders who practice thoughtful silence before responding often create environments where employees feel heard and respected. There is also a moral dimension to conscious silence. Choosing to remain quiet can be an ethical act when it avoids unnecessary harm. For example, withholding judgment until all facts are known prevents misunderstandings and false accusations. Conscious silence can also demonstrate humility, acknowledging that not every situation requires immediate commentary or intervention. This deliberate restraint reflects emotional maturity rather than weakness. The challenge lies in discerning when silence supports peace and when it sustains harm. This requires ongoing self-awareness and courage. True peace is not achieved by avoiding conflict, but by engaging with it thoughtfully. Conscious silence provides the breathing space needed to navigate complex situations without surrendering personal truth. When practiced with intention, silence transforms from a symbol of fear into a tool for clarity and genuine understanding. Throughout life, we are taught that staying quiet will preserve peace. We learn it from parents, teachers, and even social expectations that reward obedience over expression. Yet, as we have explored, this belief is only partially true. People stay silent for many reasons, but when silence is driven by fear, coercion, or conformity, it does not create peace. It hides pain, prolongs conflict, and allows harm to continue unseen. Understanding this difference between protective silence and destructive silence is essential if we wish to live authentically and foster relationships that are truly healthy. Dark psychology reveals that silence is more than the absence of speech. It is a powerful psychological tool. It can be used to control, manipulate, or protect. In abusive dynamics, silence shields those in power while isolating those without it. In families and workplaces, silence conceals conflicts that gradually erode trust. On a societal scale, collective silence sustains injustice and enables corruption. The harm does not always erupt immediately, but it builds quietly, manifesting in anxiety, resentment, and fractured relationships. Yet silence itself is not inherently harmful. When chosen consciously, it can serve as a moment for reflection and understanding. It allows space to listen deeply, regulate emotions, and approach conflict with clarity rather than impulsivity. This conscious silence stands in stark contrast to the unconscious silence, born of fear, where one fosters growth and mutual respect. The other perpetuates harm and false harmony. Recognizing this distinction is the first step toward using silence responsibly, rather than letting it control us. The moral weight of silence cannot be ignored. In moments of injustice, failing to speak can feel safer, but it quietly aligns us with what is wrong. Philosophers and psychologists alike remind us that neutrality often benefits the aggressor, not the victim. Asking yourself why you are quiet in a given moment can reveal whether your silence protects peace or simply avoids discomfort. This awareness empowers you to choose differently when silence no longer serves your well-being or your integrity. As we close, consider how silence shapes your own life and the lives of those around you. Are there moments where your quiet has protected harm rather than prevented it? Are there truths that remain unspoken out of fear, yet continue to weigh on your mind? These questions are not easy, but facing them is the path to genuine understanding and authentic peace. If this exploration has given you insight, take a moment to share it with someone who may need it. Leave a comment about a time when breaking your silence changed something important in your life, or when staying quiet felt like the only option. Subscribe to continue learning about the deeper layers of dark psychology and how they shape human behavior. Together we can uncover truths that remain hidden beneath the quiet surface and choose to confront them with understanding rather than fear.